pour le. Yes, I think spread did
So I have to pass it. The clicker is there? Oops.
Okay. Live streaming is open. So the walls that are here.
You want to stand here?
After when I start my talk, so I can see the
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I know it was difficult to come in, right? For some, the queues were long. So welcome to this morning's panel. It's Coral Reef Monitoring and Evaluation, Gaining Insights to Achieve Conservation Impacts. And we have three amazing panelists this morning. Again, only women. That's something to say about coral conservation. So our three panelists are Dr. Melanie McField, Director of the Healthy Reefs for Healthy People and co-chair of the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network for the Caribbean. Then we have Oriane Petit from SPARAC, Marine Ecosystems Project Officer and co-chair of the GCRMN Caribbean. And our third presenter is Margot Montferret of the International Policy and Advocacy Manager of the International Coral Reef Initiative, Secretariat, and of the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network Global. The three of them will present, and then we'll have an open session of Q&A. So Melanie, if you want to start.
Maybe this one. Let's see if this one doesn't squeak. Maybe that's better. Okay. Okay, well, good. Oops. It's too close. Oops. Back up into the plant. All right. Yeah. Maybe it's that. Too close. Okay. Stand here. Thank you for coming. Our idea for this session was really to talk about monitoring and evaluation, and then getting into the reporting that creates a space and a catalyst for conservation actions, and how do you integrate these monitoring reports to actually get something done, because that is the point of all the monitoring. We need to keep tabs on the ecosystem, but we also want to use that data immediately, feeding it back into management to make changes. So that's been the goal of our report cards for the last 18 years. This is our 8th report card for the Mesoamerican Reef, and we're launching it today in the 4 countries. So events are going on in Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras to launch this report. So we do them every other year normally. So this is just, I'm going to go over the overall, who we are and the results of this large-scale reef monitoring effort, and then talk about some of the threats and what we're doing about it and with the partners in the region. Just to give an overview for a couple people that might not know where we are, Mesoamerican Reef is in the northwestern Caribbean. You can see Cuba over in the upper right corner. It's a long, complicated mosaic of ecosystems. So it's not just a coral reef, it's got massive mangroves and seagrass beds and a lot of threatened and endangered species. And it's highly valuable. A study a few years ago found the value to be around $4.5 billion per year. And that could increase by like $2 billion if you actually improve reef health, and then likewise it can decrease if you lose health. And so that's what we're seeing. The economic value of this change in reef health is really important. The group that puts together the report card, we're called Healthy Reefs for Healthy People. We just recently became an NGO, but we've been working in the region as an initiative for the last 18 years. And we came up with our vision statement, which is just to have a thriving and healthy marine ecosystem where well-informed and influential reef shareholders are actively engaged in safeguarding this valuable natural asset. So we're trying to make the idea of the reef as a shared resource and a valuable resource come down to the people of the region. So that's why this report card, it's all based in science, but it's very popular in terms of the understandable nature of it and the color coding. And that's what we do with our report cards, trying to make it more amenable to having everyone understand. The initiative itself is a partnership with over 70 organizations. So these are all of the partners in the initiative. These include donors, it includes some universities in the region that do monitoring evaluation, and then mostly it's NGOs, local NGOs that manage marine protected areas. We also have the bingos that are involved in helping with bringing international funding and supporting conservation throughout the region. Like I said, this is our 8th report card, so that's just the covers of all the ones you can see. And the first thing over on the top left is a guide to indicators of reef health, and we wrote that first. That's like a 150-page book that really describes all these indicators and gives you information about why each one is useful and what it tells you about reef health. But the basis of the report card is just these 4 main indicators, and these are the indicators that we selected back in the beginning of this, back in like 2005. They're the same ones being used by the Global Fund for Coral Reef for the ecosystem monitoring. It's the percent of coral that's alive on the reef, the amount of fleshy macroalgae, which is kind of the main competitor of that coral. And then you've got fish biomass for 2 main families, two groups, functional groups, your herbivores and your main commercial fish, snappers and groupers in our case. And so with that, we have these levels, you rank them, and you get a score, 1 through 5. So it's very straightforward and easy to understand. Wherever your reef falls within that table, you get a score for 1 through 5 for each of those 4 indicators. And with that, then you can come up with a score. So for the whole Mesoamerican reef, each of these reports, we've been able to give it a score. There's one number like the Dow Jones Industrial Average for the Mesoamerican reef over the last 18 years. And you see it started in 2006 with a 2.3. This is out of 5. So you can see that's not so good. That was less than half. The orange color means poor, and the yellow color means fair. So of those 4 indicators, the top 2 are the benthic part, so that's coral and algae. The coral has been kind of consistently the better indicator on all this. It's been fair most of the time, so we have been able to maintain a functional coral level, a living coral. But you see the other things have moved around. The fleshy macroalgae has been consistently poor, and then the fish move around more. There's a lot more diversity in the fish. The other thing that's been pretty consistent over the years is our call to action, which we've been urgently calling for the last 18 years for these same things. So this I'm putting up there just so you can see it, and you'll see it again at the end. But our patience in the length of time it's taking to implement these actions is growing a little thin. And I think we've heard that many times in talks here at the COP. But back to the current situation, just to understand in more detail how we are doing, those pies that I was showing you, that was Mesoamerican reef overall. So looking at that's the pie that's up on top. Down below that, you can see the consolidated data for the 4 countries. Belize is exactly the same as the Mesoamerican reef. Mexico to the left has a little higher score, so it's got a 2.8. It's the only one ranked fair overall. And you note that their commercial fish species is in the fair. It's yellow, not orange, like all the others. Now, when you move to the right and you see Guatemala and Honduras, there's a lot more variability. They both have critical levels of commercial fish. So that is definitely something to work on. And those 2 countries getting more fishery regulations and more fully protected areas. But they both have higher coral cover. So traditionally, these areas have had really good coral cover. And Guatemala has a smaller reef area and one area that's really high, one of the highest coral covers in the whole Mar. With the map, you can take a copy of the report if you like. It's easier to see the dots. They're very small, but you can see that it's not like there's a lot of poor sites in one area and good in another. It's very dispersed throughout the reef. So the current situation, it's a little easier to see when you roll these up, because of that variability. The more comprehensive way to look at it is aggregating those sites, those many different sites, into these subregions. So there's 18 subregions. They're more often a management unit, like equivalent to a large marine protected area. It's also a biogeographic region. And looking at them, you can see that Glover's, that atoll, had the highest increase. Its reef health went up from poor to good. And Cozumel this year had the largest decrease. They've been kind of consistently our darling site, our darling region with good. It's been good for the last like 4 years, 4 reports. And this time it dropped to fair, but it's still relatively high. Herbivorous fish was the indicator with more of these subregions in good condition, and even some that are in very good. And then fleshy macroalgae was the one that had consistently lower scores. You can look at the table and actually see all the data. If you look at those big colored squares, just looking over time, that's each of the report cards. That this is going north to south, just kind of scanning down the whole Mesoamerican reef. You can see in the past we had more variability and we had more of the green subregions, which that's good. Those are the good ones. And this time we have 2 that are in critical and none in good. But most of them are fair and good and poor. Actually, more of them are poor. But the good news in this, and this we do need to, keep this in mind and celebrate it, is that 4 times as many subregions improved in health compared to the last report. So 8 of them improved and only 2 of them declined, and another 8 stayed the same. Just looking at the data quickly over time, coral cover generally has been increasing, so that's really good news in a world that all this has been going on. Although our last assessment, this report, you see that 3 of the 4 countries did decline in coral cover. So that's due to the bleaching and the disease taking a toll. The fleshy macroalgae has been consistently a problem, going up, sometimes going down in response to management actions that have been tweaking the herbivore abundance, which I'll show you next. But in general, this has actually gone down a little bit in our last report, probably due to this, which is the increase in parrotfish. So we've had these protections for almost 10 years in some places, and it's varied according to the level of enforcement in different years. But as long as the regulation of protecting parrotfish is enforced, we do see the increase in parrotfish biomass, and then in 4 or 5 years, we begin to see the decrease in macroalgae. So I think this is a good sign that we're seeing those 2 things in unison as we would expect. Commercial fish, on the other hand, has been declining, and with the exception of Belize, which showed a big increase this year, it kind of went back to the way it was pre-COVID, which that is just, we think is attributable to enforcement. So during COVID, the enforcement agencies were not out, and there was just a need to go out and fish the reefs for food, and it served that purpose. But with going back to normal and back to enforcement, it kind of went back to the same level that it had been. So a little bit about some of the threats and the ways that these threats are being monitored and addressed. This was the first time that we've included water quality in the report card because we had a large-scale study. It was organized by Coral Reef Alliance, and it included 90 sites across the whole MAR, monitored almost every month for 12 months. So that was 20 different partners were involved, and it had almost 32,000 data points. But the big picture summary of this is that only 3 of the 90 sites in the whole MAR were classified as non-degraded. So there is a water quality, even the control sites, like half of those 90 were supposed to be control sites, and they had almost the same levels of nutrients and turbidity as the other sites, because I think that the scale of the impacts is just kind of everywhere. We have, like I said, nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and also pathogens. So enterococcus and fecal coliforms were measured, and there were most of the sites, more than half the sites, had a problem with that. And oxygen, we were very surprised to see that oxygen levels were not at good levels. So we thought we had not recognized that. We've read about it in other places, but actually, 64% of them were either fair or poor. So they weren't at the good level. So that's just another thing we need to consider, and that's related to temperature and nutrients. So the bleaching is the other big story this year. We had the highest heat stress. You watch this little GIF roll, and you can see, I mean, we came up with new color schemes with those purples and browns. We had never used that before. We had just gone from blue to red, but the numbers of degree heating weeks got so much higher that we had to develop new colors and new category levels for bleaching. So it was unprecedented. But looking at our data that was collected through like November last year, we had about 40% of the corals were affected, were bleached. We don't yet know what the overall mortality was, but it was definitely not a washout across the Mesoamerican reef. It's more punctuated. Certain areas, like I'll give you this example. This actually came in, the example of Cordelia it happened in January, so we didn't include it in the report card, but it did wipe out that reef, and that was our iconic reef with the highest coral cover of this endangered Acropora cervicornis. So that was very sad to see that. But these locations, it is some of the highest coral cover areas. It was Puerto Morelos, Tela, and Cordelia in Honduras were the ones that were hit the hardest, severe mortality. Mortality is also definitely an issue with these diseases because they are not like bleaching where the corals can recover. Once they get these diseases, they're gone. And stony coral tissue loss disease is there in 3 of the 4 countries. Guatemala has not reported it yet, but it is affecting more than 20 species of coral and is a major problem throughout the reef. That pillared coral that you see, the beautiful one in the upper right, 3 out of 4 colonies across the whole mar are infected. So that species is like really threatened with like total ecological extinction due to this disease. But going on to fish and marine protected areas, this is one of our ways, that was all the threats that we can't control too much about bleaching and disease. But fish, and this is where our story got more positive this year, we have been enforcing these protected areas. The pink is the fully protected, the purple is the highly protected, and you can see that significant difference. For the snappers and groupers, there's a major difference between fully and highly protected. And so this is why we have always stuck to our 20% fully protected recommendation. We also recommend and support the 30 by 30, that's great, but that 30 is kind of highly protected. And we want to make sure that within that we get at least 20% that's fully protected, because that you can see is what is critical for those snappers and groupers, the highly targeted fish. The parrotfish is less, you shouldn't see any difference. If everyone's obeying the rules, you would see no difference at all in the parrotfish because it's protected everywhere in the mar. That was efforts that were underway. Well, except coastal Honduras, that's the only part that's not protected. But I think this just shows you that enforcement of any fisheries rule is going to be better within a marine protected area because there's rangers and there's enforcement. Going back to the big picture, not just marine protected areas, but looking at our fish overall, of the tens of thousands of fish that were counted, most of them were immature. So this is looking at the dotted line is the sexual maturity length for each of these species. The 4 on the left are snappers, and the 4 on the right are groupers. And you can just see that for both of these families of fish, most of them are immature. So looking at the top right, that is Nassau grouper. That's the guy, the picture you got there. That's the only fish that has regulations in most of these countries. Regulations of the size limit. So you make sure you get it to reproductive size before you can fish it. And in this one, they actually have a maximum size too, so you don't catch the big ones. So you have to catch within a certain basket size. And that seems to have worked, because look at that. That's the only one that has like a nice balanced population. They have more, they at least have some of those large individuals that can't reproduce. So that shows that the fisheries regulations do have an opportunity to work, and we just need to get them for the other species. So for the interventions for corals and some of what we're doing, many different partner groups are working on coral restoration. And we have this little summary here where we're showing all of them are working with the branching corals. Those are the fast-growing corals, and they were hit really hard with this bleaching. Only about less than a quarter are working on the massive corals. So that's our populations. If we are relying on restoration to rebuild our populations, we need to put a little more effort into these massive corals because they're also critically important to the biodiversity. Different things live in them, and they're slow growing, so it will be a long process. But we have had a lot of effort and a lot of success in our region, and with cryopreservation and protecting these genetic diversity by doing sexual reproduction as well. But corals aren't the only things being restored. We're trying to restore the process of herbivory. And as I told you, parrotfish have been protected, so we did that in the 4 countries. And we're also working on a research project, and this is partly funded by the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, learning the king crab life cycle and how to raise these herbivores. They're voracious herbivores. They feed more than parrotfish on the macroalgae that's growing over the reef, and they're very valuable as a seafood product. So we are working with Inapesca in Mexico for ways to raise them and try to get that rolled out. Cais Cochinos now is doing it. We had a project with TASA the last couple of years in Belize working on low-tech methods for growing this crab and putting it out in the reef for restoration. They really can consume a lot. The 175 that we've outplanted in Mexico, it's been estimated it's 28 tons of macroalgae, those little guys. And they're only about 10, 15 centimeters when you put them out. So they eat a lot. So finally, I'll just end with the call to action again. Same stuff we've been saying. We're just gonna keep saying it. Our first report cards, we had a long list of recommendations. And then over a few of them, we realized, no, it's not really getting tracked, it's not getting implemented. So we've focused on these 4, and we're just gonna keep saying it until it's done. There's our website. We have a new website, so I encourage everyone to come have a look at it. You can download this report card. There's also a QR code at the back on the poster there where it might make it easier for you to do that. So thank you. Any questions? Yes?
Yeah, do I need the microphone?
Maybe yes, so people in the back.
I have a question. I don't know if you already mentioned it, but you said that this is the first report that includes water quality as a threat. I'm just wondering, why is that? In AIRA, we've been working with the Motagua River in Guatemala, and we know it's an existing problem in Honduras and Guatemala. The water quality of the river that ends up at the Mar region. I just want to know.
Yeah, we've talked about it for a long time, but never had a study large enough for the whole Mesoamerican reef. So we know of a number of different studies in Mexico. There's a couple groups doing it, but people had different methods and were monitoring different things, and it wasn't always the same time. And then we didn't have a regional scope. So we're trying to, the things that we present are regional. And so this was the first time that a project that was regional in scope had been funded. So yeah, I hope we can keep it going, but it was really expensive. So that's the problem. So if there is some way that with technology we can do a better job of maybe remote sensing some of these things, that would make it a lot more affordable if we can find indicators that are not actually bottles collected and run through a lab for some of it. So
Thank you.
Yes, Angela.
Thank you. As always, I think this is a fantastic project, and we are actually looking at copying some of your indicators and the way that you're doing in Indonesia, Philippines, and Zanzibar. And I know that's something that you're pulling. The data, so you were able to show the increase in parrotfish, the decrease in macroalgae. Were you also able to see a subsequent change to coral cover?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. So
And some more scientific studies, smaller area and more, that may not be that straightforward, so we'll see. I think, and it also, one of the things we've started looking at is not all parrotfish are the same. So it may be that a tweaking of the regulation in the future to some of them cause more erosion than others, and some of them are just better herbivores. So it may be that, you could tweak that to really try to enhance the species that are the better herbivores that don't cause any erosion. It's a process, so we're never saying it's perfect, right? And that's why you keep monitoring and keep looking at it and then change what you do. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you, Melanie. Well, the research that you guys do is really valuable for the region. And I was wondering if you can tell us a bit more about the call to action that you mentioned at the beginning, because it's been like a lot of years, advocating for changes, for policy, for the governments to do something about it. So I would just like to know what other efforts are you doing for the region? And as you know, AIDA does a lot of advocacy and litigation, and right now we are doing a litigation against the municipalities in Guatemala because of the Motagua River. So if you want to get more information on that, we're not working in the coast at the moment. We're working near the city, so Guatemala City and Chinautla. We know it's really on the top of the river basin, but we decided that, that's the way to go, litigation, because, municipalities are not doing anything about it. So that's for your information, but we'd like to know what other actions you're taking to see if we can collaborate or join efforts, because, coral reefs are fundamental for the ocean, for the region, and we need to do something about it.
Yes, great, thank you. That's interesting news. I hadn't heard that about the litigation. So regarding sewage treatment, we're really trying to get this GFCR project to get some private sector investment and working on how can we get technology improvements off the grid, kind of scale things for these remote resorts that are often really close to important critical reefs, but yet there's not adequate sewage treatment and anywhere. So I think there's a lot of different approaches, getting the private sector involved, the municipalities. We haven't had that level of work in the other countries, although Mexico is a little more advanced with that and looking at trying to encourage enforcement or implementation of the Cartagena Convention. So it's now been signed, but implementation of that and monitoring. So the governments aren't actually necessarily monitoring to see that they're not breaking the rules of the convention that was signed. So that we're all trying to help with that and get the NGOs talking to each other and just have a little more of a round table about the water quality. But I think we would certainly support that with data, if anything, data or other partners that you need, because that's it's always kind of the last step you want to take, but it does get action usually, and we're getting close to that. I think on a lot of these, on the protected areas, we're just doing typical encouraging and getting the different partner groups and all that to increase the amount of the area. There's a lot in full protection. It's over 50% of them are, in protection, but 3% in full protection. So it's within the boundaries of the existing marine protected areas. We need to rezone and change more of that into full protection. And in Belize, the Prime Minister committed over a year ago to have 20% of the coral reef in full protection. But since then, the needle hadn't moved. So it's still, at 2%. Of coral reef, it's at 7% full protection. It's the whole territorial sea is 2. So it's an ongoing push for these things, and we do an eco audit that we're planning to do next year, and that's where we track the implementation. So maybe we could get AIDA's help looking at some of those indicators too. So I think it's time to go on to the next talk. So yes.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and I think we can have more questions at the end after you hear all of the speakers. So, Marianne?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Oriane Petit, Marine Ecosystem Project Officer at the Coral Reef. And today I will speak about the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network for the Caribbean. So thank you for being present today. First, a little word about the SPORAC. So the Cartagena Convention is a legal agreement on marine protection for the Caribbean Sea, and it was created in 1986. And there are 3 different protocols. One on oil spill protocol, the other one on land-based sources of marine pollution protocol, and the third one on specially protected areas and wildlife protocol. And there are few regional activity centers, the Rempetec Caraïbes, the CMAP, the IMA, and the SPORAC. And the SPORAC is based in Guadeloupe, and so we are working with contracting parties. We have 18 contracting states, signatory states in the region. So here you can see that there are 27 territories, and in the SPOR protocol you have different annexes. The 1 and 2 are for food protection, and the Annex 3 is for sustainable use. So in the Annex 1 and 2 we have the Acropora cervicalis and Acropora palmata corals, and the Annex 3 we have all the other corals in the region. So the GCRMN Caribbean, so the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network, is an open and growing network of coral reef scientists and managers involved in coral monitoring in the wider Caribbean region. The mission is to revitalize and strengthen coral reef monitoring in the region, to ensure the collection of useful, comparable, accessible data, to promote integrated approach, also with socio-economic data, which is key, and also to create regular, robust and strategic reporting to influence coastal management with decision-making at the regional level, but also with managers at the local level. So the GCRMN was created by ICRI in 1995, and there are regional nodes. So in the Caribbean nodes, we developed it in 2014, a report on the status and trends of Caribbean coral reefs. And we noticed that before the report, the Caribbean monitoring was scattered, disorganized, and largely ineffective due to inconsistent application of monitoring methods and approach. And there is a big need for coordination, organization in terms of data collection, information, archiving, dissemination, and international network communication. So how does it work? The GCRMN Caribbean is coordinated by the UNECEF SPORAC since 2014. Sorry.
That's really neat.
Yeah. And by also Healthy Reef Initiative, so Melanie, the director, presented today, since 2022. It's led by a steering committee of 17 members and members at large forum with more than 270 experts from all the Caribbean region. And all the monitoring and the governance is based on terms of reference, rules of procedures. And we have a network of more than 250 members sharing experience, sharing monitoring protocols, information, knowledge about coral reefs. So we cover among 41 Caribbean countries and territories in the region. We also have communication by the forum, we have a web page, you can find it on the ICRI website also, and Facebook page. So here is just a picture of the steering committee. So you can see we have experts from NOAA in the USA, from a university in Jamaica, from IFRECOR, which is also a coral network in the French islands and the French West Indies here, from the governments of Barbados, Reef Check, marine science centers, etc. So it's We are working with the best experts in the region. So here, just a timeline to understand the Jetterman was created in 1995, but also the SOCMON, which is the Socio-Economic Monitoring Network, was created in 2000. So you see here the first reports in 2014, sorry. And so it was the status and trends of Caribbean coral reef from 1970 to 2012. We saved Jeremy Jackson and all reports. And now, 10 years after, in 2025, it's time to have a new picture of the coral reef, to have a new status and trend report. And that's the work we're doing now, in collaboration also with the ICRI at the global level, because the Jetterman is also working on a new global report. And we'll have also a regional chapter on the Caribbean in the global report. So now, so here are the reports. Sorry, I changed the sets. Now we are calling for data for the two reports, so the regional one and the global one. And it was open from July to the 30th of November. So we are very happy to say you still have a month to contribute to data, and we are really calling all the scientists. If you have any data on coral, it's time to share it, because next time it will be in 10 years for the regional report. So please contribute. It's very important to have a regional representation also. A geographical representation of the region, to have all the countries, even the one with a few financial means for monitoring. So you can find on the ICRI website and the SCOROC website a guide for data contributors with all information in it. So you will see we are looking for data monitoring on percentage cover for benthic organisms. We are also looking for metadata in general, the finance taxonomic level, the finance spatial level you have, and the more data you have, the best it is for the report. How to share data? It's very easy. You go on the ICRI website, SCOROC website, and you will have my email address and Jeremy Vica, who is the data analyst for the global Jetterman, and so you can ask all the questions you want, and if you need to change in the data sharing agreement the condition for sharing, it's also possible. We are very open to any any country's demands. So we started collecting data from the beginning of July, so we already have a good data sets. We have more than 3,000 sites, monitoring sites. We have more than 7,500 surveys, and we have data from 1982 to 2024. Jeremy is currently working on data integration, so he's currently integrating data from NOAA, from Jamaica, from Cuba. So feel free to share it, and if you want to spread the word about it, it's very welcome. So here you can see a focus on the West Indies and Jamaica for data. This map is available. The blue in blue isn't very nice, but you can see the website is Jetterman DB Eventos on earthengine.app. I can share it with you if you want. So you can see in real time the data integration for the region and even for the world reports. Here I want to speak about some data gaps we already identified. So we still have a month, so a month also to fill the data gaps. For example, I just put some countries or territories with few data or no data. If you know people from Nicaragua, San Bartolome, Saint Eustatius, Cayman Islands, Anguilla, and Aruba, we are we are looking for data from those sites, because if we don't have data on a site, on a country, on a territory, we won't be able to have a chapter in the report, and that's really a shame. 3 weeks ago, we had the chance to have a data analysis workshop in the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, in Mexico, in Puerto Morelos. And we, thanks to the Global Fund for Coral Reef and the UNAM, were able to gather 15 experts from all the region working on data integration, identification of data gaps, data analysis, first result interpretation, standardized methodology also for data analysis, and work plan for the next year, because we are more than 200 people working together, so it's a big work of coordination and working collaboratively. We also had some synergies with GFCR. Here are some pictures of the nice workshop. So we also visit 2 laboratories, one on the king crabs, Melanie mentioned in her presentation, and one other on coral reproduction and cryopreservation of corals. Yes, so the workshop was also a side of Reef Plus UNDP workshop, and it was very nice also to speak with the other experts. So the next report will be aligned with, I can't find my word, we'll comment later. So in the report, I just want to show you very rapidly what will be in, so you know what to expect in the report. So we will mention, of course, coral reef in the Caribbean with the big picture of distribution, biodiversity, human population, ecosystem services. But we will also mention the threats to the coral reef at the regional level. So the climate change, CO2, the bleaching, the marine heat waves, the sea surface temperature, hurricanes. Here you can see a map. Ocean acidification, desoxygenation, and coastal development and land use, nutriment, sediments, other pollution, and shipping. So that's the key topic the experts were agreed during the workshop to mention in the invasive species. Benthic cover, spatial temporal distribution of monitoring, trends of major benthic groups, trends in major hard coral genera. And the added value of this report is also to mention the fishes. Melanie also mentioned it, that's very key for speaking about coral reef, and I think it won't be in the global report, so it's very important in the Caribbean region to gather data on fish, even if it's a big challenge for data. So we will look at spatial temporal distribution of monitoring, size distribution of major fish families, and temporal trend in biomass and major fish families. And the fish species chosen was parrotfish, surgeonfish, porpoise, and snappers. Then it's key to do recommendation, because if we only look at the status, it can be a bit depressing with the situation. So it's also important to link with international commitments and to do recommendation. So here are an example of a recommendation. Yes, so reducing of local threats, that's something, sorry, the decision maker at local level can act on, so that's very key. And also the maintenance of development of monitoring and reef restoration, etc. Here I just want to show you the list of the chapters we want to mention, so maybe you can recognize it in one territory or country. So it's a lot of chapter, 41, but for us it's very much. So we are targeting 3 levels. So international 1, at the UNOX 3, we hope to have the executive summary ready to speak to decision makers at this moment. So it will be in June 2025 in Nice in France. We also want, of course, that's a Caribbean report, so we have a regional launch. So we would like to have a launch in the COPSCO Cartagena Convention in fall 2025, and also to look at regional key meetings such as GCFI, CARICOM, etc. At the local level, we think it's very important also because we have territory chapters to have information in the local press, etc. So we hope we can have a good press release and communication campaign at the local level as well, for the conservation manager to be able to use this baseline and the numbers. So what about the challenge we are facing now? First, the data sharing. It's really difficult to gather data, and yeah, I think it's a big challenge, but we already gather a lot, and I'm sure we can have we can have more till the deadline. So maybe I will let Melanie speak more about the data sharing challenge. But we're also facing a challenge with data sharing agreements, because for each report we have to sign a new agreement, and that's a lot of work, lots of coordination, and we always sign an update data sharing agreement, but with the same people, the same party. So we hope one day we can have a single data sharing agreement for all the GSLMN report, and we can use the data we have for the next report as well. We are also facing, we are also hoping for political support to enable data sharing, because sometimes the administration are very regarding and are not keen to share the data. So if we are in the COP16 and with decision makers, so if you have the power to help us in your country, don't hesitate. Yes, and I think that's it for me. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you so much. And we can see that this represents quite a huge amount of work for you, so well done. And good luck for the preparation of the 2025 report. My question, I may have missed it actually, probably, because that was a lot of information, but is there by any chance a mention to the adaptation to climate change? Because I saw coral reef restoration, protection, but what about the adaptation and what could be implemented for that? I mean, it's a really hard question, probably.
Thank you. Here for this report, the goal is to gather all the data we already have about coral reef cover and algae cover and also case studies. So actually I think it could be integrated as a case studies, but all what we're saying is really based on literacy. So maybe, I don't know, Melanie, if you want to add something on climate change adaptation, but of course, maybe we will more speak about the threats of climate change and CO2 on coral reefs. And yeah, because it's very linked to bleaching and disease, but I don't know about adaptation. Melanie, you want to add something? She is the co-chair.
I'm not sure how that would, like in the report, since it's a report on like monitoring and status trends, the adaptation is usually more of a research, an undertaking of research to see what genetic strains might be adapting faster, and so that's a different level. We're not able to do that really at this level. But I think if some of that has gone on in certain areas, you can use this data to say, look, it has.
The Caribbean report, and maybe where all the different coordinators from around the world can all come together and maybe put together a standardized monitoring mechanism that the whole world can actually work with. For us at the regional secretariat, we would want to also be part of this process. But in terms of collecting the data, it's like a visual inspection of the reef systems, but how do you sort of like work through it to answer the question that Chris and our friend over here asked earlier on about how far you can actually go down in monitoring it? Because last week we had a presentation over here, and one of the questions that were asked was about the genetics of coral species, and whether some corals being resilient to temperature rise is related to their genetic makeup. And so the initial question about adaptation also falls into that category as well. So I just wanted to check if that can be accommodated.
Thank you very much for the question. I can just speak for the Caribbean node, just on the Caribbean node, and we have procedures and protocols for monitoring. And of course, we are asking for using this protocol. It's much easier for data integration, as you are saying, but because there are different financial needs, and also we can't, we are accepting data from different protocols, of course, but the protocol data are the more detailed one and the more used for the reports. And I think that's a very good transition with Margot's presentation, because it's also mentioning the global reports and the global monitoring framework. Thank you. Maybe Margot, if you want to... Yeah, if no more questions. Thank you.
Then we go to Margot. That will provide information on the plans for the 2026 global GCR.
Hi everyone, and thank you very much for having me speak today, Melanie. I'm actually speaking on behalf of one of my colleagues, Tom Dallison, who's leading the data collation. So if you do have questions like that, please don't ask me, ask him. And also we have the ICRI Global Coordinator in the room, Francis Storm, and he loves to talk. So if you do have questions, please aim them at him. He's over there in the corner.
We need to talk after.
Yeah, I thought that was me. I get in trouble quite a lot. I'd also like to thank the co-sponsors of the Pavilion. So this is really why we can host this space today, and I see a lot of people in the room, so thank you very much. It's been a great space to talk about coral reefs all week and ensure that they are mentioned in the international agenda, especially when we come to the GBF. So I'm just going to take you back. I know a lot of people in the room know about ICRI, but for the purpose of those who don't, I'll just tell you a little bit more about who we are. So essentially we're a global partnership between nations and organisations that strives to preserve coral reefs and related ecosystems around the world. We were founded back in 1994, so 2024 marks 30 years of dedication towards conservation, restoration and resilience of coral reefs. We were actually announced at the inaugural conference of the parties to the CBD back in 1994, and Tim Worth, the Undersecretary of State at the time, said it was one of the most exciting and emerging partnerships in the area of conservation and sustainable use of coral reefs. So quite amazing to see how we've moved throughout the years. We were founded by 8 nations, so Australia, France, Japan, Jamaica, the Philippines, Sweden, United Kingdom and the USA, and we now count over 100 members. We welcomed our 102nd member at the 38th ICRI General Meeting, and that was rare, and we include 45 countries, accounting for over 75% of the world's coral reefs. But we're not just countries, we also have NGOs, private industry, IGOs, and we work quite closely with the UNEP regional seas. So we really bring together multiple different stakeholders into the room to ensure that coral reefs are protected, conserved. We're currently chaired by the United States of America, so the US Department of State and NOAA, and we're coming to the end of the plan of action. At the 38th General Meeting, the membership was pleased to welcome the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to take on the new chair, so from 2025 to 2027, they'll be operating for 3 years, and this will be hosted by the General Organisation of the Conservation of Coral Reefs and Sea Turtles in the Red Sea, so SHAMS. And then just to re-highlight, this is quite important, that the GCRMN is an operational network of ICRI. So we work in tandem. ICRI essentially works at the science to policy aspect for coral reefs. So I don't know if you saw, we launched some key asks for coral reefs at the CBD COP16 earlier this week. And this is really essentially to remind people that although coral reefs aren't mentioned within the GBF, the targets are still relevant. So we highlighted just a few things that we wanted to really make sure that was going to policymakers when it came to coral reefs. So the first one was strengthen management frameworks. Coral reefs cover 0.1% of the ocean floor, so a very small fraction. And we know that the target is to achieve 30 by 30 by 2030. But we really want to extend beyond this and transcend that and have 100% of coral reefs protected by 2050. For 0.1% of the ocean, that should be an easy task. And so we're really sort of advocating for strengthened management frameworks. Effective restoration of coral reefs. So also looking at scalability, but also affordability. So ensuring that everyone around the world has the possibility to restore reefs and that it is effective. Pollution management and regulation, so obviously land-based sources of pollution, water quality, things like that. Capacity building and knowledge sharing, so incredibly important. Robust monitoring and accountability, so that's through the GCRMN. And then of course scaling up finances from public and private sectors. So moving beyond ICRI and sort of going into the GCRMN a little bit more, I know Melanie and Orion touched on this. But the GCRMN was established in 1995 by ICRI, and it was under 4 primary goals. So 3 main goals, with the 4th overarching goal of build human and technical capacity. But those main 3 were to improve the understanding of coral reef status and trends globally and regionally, analyse and communicate coral reef biophysical, social and economic trends, providing science-based recommendations in support of raising awareness, management and policy development, and then to enable and facilitate greater utilisation of coral reef data, including in research. And then of course that 4th overarching goal, which was to build technical and human capacity. As Orion mentioned, the GCRMN functions through 10 regional nodes, which cover all the regions of the world's tropical coral reefs, and then each of these nodes is coordinated by a regional coordinator with its own governance. They all have their own web pages on the GCRMN as well, so it's very important to sort of go to your region. You can find some more information about that. Moving on a little bit, the flagship products of the GCRMN are the Status of Coral Reefs of the World reports, and since 1995 we've had 6 of these reports. The last one was released in 2021, and it's the first global quantitative assessment of the world's coral reefs, so it's really important that we update this information, especially with what's going on around the world when it comes to coral reefs and the 4th global bleaching event. Orion touched on this as well. So we do have regional reports too. So there's the upcoming regional reports from the Pacific as well as the Caribbean. And then we also have the Global Socio-Economic Monitoring Initiative for Coastal Management, SOCMON, and that takes part with the GCRMN as well. We do also produce topical reports at the request of the GCRMN Steering Committee and the ICRI membership. For example, we had an assessment on the impact of the 2024 tsunami, bleaching and hurricanes in the Caribbean in 25, as well as an assessment of ICRI's coral reef indicators across multiple countries to advise and support ICRI and its members in international policy. So the 2020 report, which was released in 2021, like I mentioned a minute ago, it was the first quantitative analysis of global data sets compiled from more raw monitoring data. So what's quite important about this is it had over 300 members of the network contributed to that data, and it spanned from 1978 to 2019, so lots of information there. It consisted of almost 2 million observations from more than 12,000 sites in 73 reef-bearing countries around the world. One of the key stats from this report was essentially that 14% of live coral on the coral reefs was lost between 2008 and 2019, so quite a large number. These stats that you see at the bottom from the 2020 report, when it was initially launched, so this isn't sort of what's happened since then, but from the initial launch, there was 4,000 downloads, 592 media articles across 480 outlets in 62 countries and 18 languages, with 2.5 billion engagements. So this clearly demonstrates a need for the global reports, which provides critical mechanisms for coral nations to understand the status of their coral reefs and deliver indicators to implement their national and international targets, such as the GBF. You can tell it's Tom's presentation because I'm not this tech savvy. So the 2025 report, given the urgency to conserve coral reefs and the commitments made by countries to 2030, they're calling for reef monitoring